Hey guys, and welcome to English 101. Today I'm gonna give you line by line explanation of Salvatore. It's written by W Somerset Maugham. But firstly, let me summarize the whole story in short. Salvatore is a story of lovers who are never going to be together. The protagonist of the story is Salvatore, who is a fisherman, and he is madly in love with the pretty girl who lives on the Grande Marina. They are engaged, but they can't marry. They are engaged, but they can't marry till Salvatore has done his military service. Salvatore leaves the island and becomes a sailor in the navy of King Victor Emmanuel. He weeps like a child at the time of separation from his beloved, which is unbearable to him. It's very hard for Salvatore to live in a battleship with strangers, and he feels terribly homesick. Means he has the longing to be back. He remembers his fiancée whom he loves with a passionate young heart. Salvatore falls ill of some mysterious ailment that keeps him in hospital for months. When he learns that it's a form of rheumatism that renders him unfit for further service, then he feels rather happy, and he's happy that he could go home now and meet his beloved. But when he returns from the military service, the girl of his heart refuses to marry him. He starts a new life without her, but the loss hurts him and stays in his heart forever. Salvatore is heartbroken, but within a few months he settles down to the common round of life, and on the advice of his mother, he marries Assunta, a girl of 24 or 25, and together they live happily. Now let's get started with the lesson. I wonder if I can do it. Here suspense is created by writer, and we'll get to know about this line in the last part of the story. So let's move to the next line. I knew Salvatore first when he was a boy of 15 with a pleasant face, a laughing mouth, and carefree eyes. Here the narrator says that he knew Salvatore when he was a boy of 15 years, and here the description of Salvatore's face is given, that he has a pleasant face, a smiley face. A laughing mouth means a smiley face, and carefree eyes. Carefree eyes means childish eyes. And he used to spend the morning lying about the beach with next to nothing on, and his brown body was as thin as rail. Salvatore usually spent his morning lying about the beach next to nothing on, and here the description of his body is given that he was very thin. Here comparison of his body is done with a railway track. So you can guess how thin he was. He was full of grace. Full of grace means full of charm. He was full of charm. He was in and out of the sea all the time, swimming with the clumsy, effortless stroke common to the fisher boys. It means he jumps in and out of the sea all the time, and he swims with the clumsy, effortless stroke common to the fisher boys. Clumsy means awkward in movement. Effortless means naturally. Scrambling up the jagged rocks on his hard feet, for except on Sundays he never wore shoes. Scrambling means struggling up the jagged. Jagged means the rough rocks, or the rocks which has the sharp edges. It means struggling up the jagged rocks, sharp edged rocks on his hard feet, on his bare feet. For except on Sundays he never wore shoes. It means that he never wore shoes except on Sundays when he goes to the church. He would throw himself into the deep water with a cry of delight. Here the meaning of he would throw himself is just not that someone throw himself into the deep water. It means that he jumps into the deep water with a cry of delight, cry of happiness. His father was a fisherman who owned his own little vineyard, and Salvatore acted as nursemaid to his two younger brothers. Here the occupation of his father is given, that he was fisherman who owned a little vineyard. A vineyard is a place where wine is produced. Okay. Salvatore acted as nursemaid, means he looked after his younger brothers. He shouted to them to come inshore when they ventured out too far, and made them dress when it was time to climb the hot vine-clad hill for the frugal midday meal. When his younger brothers go out too far, then he shouted them to come inshore, and he used to dress them nicely when it was time to climb the hot vine-clad hill for the frugal midday meal. Here the frugal midday meal. Frugal means economic. The food which is not very luxurious, because Salvatore belongs from a poor family. They can't afford such a luxurious food. Let's move to the next page. But boys in those southern parts grow apace, and in a little while he was madly in love with a pretty girl who lived on the Grande Marina. Uh, grow apace means grow quickly. And in a little while, Salvatore was madly in love with a pretty girl who lived on Grande Marina. She had eyes like forest pools and held herself like daughter of Caesars. Forest pools means transparent. Here, the description of his eyes are given that she had eyes like forest pools means transparent, very clear and blue eyes. And and she's compared to the daughter of Caesars. It's a story of Roman mythology, and it's believed that daughter of Caesars was extremely beautiful. They were affianced, but they couldn't marry till Salvatore had done his military service. And when he left the island, which they were affianced, but they couldn't marry till Salvatore had done his military service. And when he left the island, which he had never left in his life before, to become a sailor in the navy of King Victor Emmanuel, he wept like a child. They are engaged, but they can't marry till Salvatore has done his military service. And as per the requirements, Salvatore leaves the island to become a sailor in the navy of King Victor Emmanuel. King Victor Emmanuel is the king of Italy. He is very unhappy, and he weeps like a child because before the time of joining the navy, Salvatore has never left his hometown. It was hard for one who had never been less free than the birds to be at the beck and call of others. Beck and call means what others command. And it was harder still to live in a battleship with strangers instead of in a little white cottage among the vines. It means it's tough or difficult for Salvatore because he was as free as birds, and now he has to work as per the commands of others. And it was very tough for him to survive in a battleship where all are strangers for him but before joining the navy, he lived peacefully in a little cottage among the vines. And when he was ashore, to walk in noisy, friendless cities with streets so crowded that he was frightened to cross them, when he had been used to silent paths and the mountains and sea. And when he was ashore, he has to walk in noisy and friendless cities. Friendless cities means that there were no friends of him, and with streets so crowded, and he failed to cross them. I suppose it had never struck him that Ischia, which he looked at every evening, it was like a fairy island in the sunset. To see what the weather would be like next day, or Vesuvius purely in the dawn, had nothing to do with him at all. But when he ceased to have them before his eyes, he realized in some dim fashion that they were as much part of him as his hands and his feet. Salvatore used to go Ischia at every evening, and it seems like a fairy island in the sunset. He go to there to see that what would be the weather next day. And he go to Vesuvius in purely in the dawn. It means early in the morning. Actually, Ischia and Vesuvius are the beautiful places in Salvatore's hometown. But it now ceased to have them before his eyes. Now he realized the true value of those beautiful places. And he realized that these places were as much part of him as his hands and his feet. He was dreadfully homesick, but it was hardest of all to be parted from the girl he loved with all his passionate young heart. He feels dreadfully homesick means that he has the longings to be back home, and it's painful for him to be parted from the girl whom he loves so deeply. He wrote to her in his childish handwriting long ill-spelled letters in which he told her how constantly he thought of her and how much he longed to be back. Salvatore used to write letters to his beloved in his childish handwriting, and ill-spelled letters means that the letters which he wrote was not grammatically correct, but in his letters his love was introduced, and his love can be shown through the letters, and he wrote in that letter that how constantly he thought of that girl whom he loved and how much he longed to be back. He was sent here and there to Spezia, to Venice, to Bari, and finally to China. We all know that in military service one has to go to different places for their duty. Similarly, Salvatore has go to the Spezia, Venice, to Bari, and finally to China. These are the places where Salvatore has to go. Here he fell ill of some mysterious ailment that kept him in hospital for months. In China, he developed some mysterious ailment or illness, which because of which he stays in a hospital for months. He bore it with the mute and uncomprehending patience of a dog. Here, uncomprehending means puzzled. He bore all this with patience, as like dog. When he learned that it was a form of rheumatism that made him unfit for further service, his heart exulted, for he couldn't go home. For he could go home, and he didn't bother. In fact, he scarcely listened when the doctors told him that he would never again be quite well. It means that when he learns that his disease is a form of rheumatism and due to this he is rendered unfit for further service, he is rather happy to learn it because he can now go home. The doctor tells him that he would never again be quite well, but Salvatore pays no attention to it. The thing which matters to him was that he could go home now and could meet his beloved and his family members. He is very happy. And rheumatism is a disease in which there is inflammation or swelling and pain on the joints. What did he care when he was going back to the little island he loved so well and the girl who was wanting for him? He is very happy that he could go home now and meet his beloved. When he got into the rowing boat that met the steamer from Naples and was rowed ashore, he saw his father and mother standing on the jetty and his two brothers, big boys now, and he waved to them. Finally, Salvatore returns to his hometown. He is welcomed home by his parents and brothers on the jetty. And his two brothers are now big. Jetty is a place where landing of jetty is a landing place for steamers. His eyes searched among the crowd that waited there for the girl. He couldn't see her. His anxious, eager eyes failed to see the girl of his heart there, and he is disappointed. There was a great deal of kissing when he jumped up the steps, and they all emotional creatures cried a little when they exchanged their greetings. It means that the family members of Salvatore welcomed him by hugging and kissing him, and they exchanged their greetings. He asked where the girl was. His mother told him that she didn't know. They hadn't seen her for 2 or 3 weeks. So in the evening, when the moon was shining over the placid sea and the lights of Naples twinkled in the distance, he walked down to the Grande Marina to her house. Salvatore asked her mother about his beloved, but her mother replied that he hadn't seen her for 2 or 3 weeks. So in the evening, Salvatore went to her house. Salvatore went to her house in the calm when the lights were shining over the calm sea and the lights of Naples were twinkling. He went to her house. She was sitting on the doorstep with her mother. He was a little shy because he hadn't seen her for so long. He asked her if she had not received the letter that he had written to her to say that he was coming home. Salvatore was blushing and feeling shy because he hadn't seen her for so long because he was busy in his military service. Salvatore asked her had she not received the letter which he had written to her to say that he was coming home. He asked her because she has not come to jetty. Yes, they had received the letter, and they had been told by another of the island boys that he was ill. She tells Salvatore that they had heard about his illness and that he would never be quite well again. Some of the island boys has told him. Some of the island boys has told her family. Yes, that was why he was back. Was it not a piece of luck? These are the lines said by narrator. Narrator said that because of her illness only he had came home back, and narrator believed that it was his luck. Oh, but they had heard that he would never be quite well again. Her family has been told that Salvatore was ill and he would never be quite well again. The doctor talked a lot of nonsense, but he knew very well that now he was home again, he would recover. According to him, doctor talked all nonsense, and Salvatore was now at home, and he would be quite well again. They were silent for a little, and then the mother nudged the girl. The family was silent for some time, and then her mother nudged the girl. Nudged means poked the girl. She didn't try to soften the blow. She told him straight out with the blunt directness of her race that she couldn't marry a man who would never be strong enough to walk like a man. Her mother says that she is not making the serious situation less worse. And then she told him straight out that. And then Salvatore's fiancée, poked by her mother, tells him bluntly that she cannot marry a man who would never be strong enough to walk like a man. And she cannot afford to marry a man who might not be able to support her. They had made up their minds, her mother and father and she, and her father would never give consent. All the family members had made up their minds that they are not going to give permission for Salvatore and for her daughter to marry. When Salvatore went home, he found that they all knew. When Salvatore returns home, then he found that all his family members knew that. The girl's father had been to tell them what they had decided, but they had lacked the courage to tell him themselves. The girl's father came to Salvatore's home a month back, and he told them that what they had decided, that they would not give her consent to and they would never give consent for their marriage. But Salvatore's family members had lacked the courage to tell him that about all this. He wept on his mother's bosom. He was terribly unhappy, but he didn't blame the girl. Salvatore weeps on his mother's bosom, on his mother's chest. He's terribly unhappy, he's very unhappy, but he didn't blame the girl for all this. Because he knows that a girl cannot afford to marry a man who might not be able to support her. That's why he doesn't complain, nor does he speak a hard word to her. A fisherman's life is hard and it needs strength and endurance. He knew very well that a girl couldn't afford to marry a man who might not be able to support her. His smile was very sad and his eyes had the look of a dog that has been beaten. But he didn't complain and he never said a hard word of the girl he had loved so well. It's mentioned that in fisherman's life, strength and endurance. Endurance means patience. Strength and patience is very important. So Salvatore is strong enough to bear all this, but actually he's heartbroken. And he has a smile which was very sad, and he had a look in his eyes that like a dog which has been beaten. Then a few months later, when he had settled down to the common round, working in his father's vineyard and fishing, his mother told him that there was a young woman in the village who was willing to marry him. Her name was Assunta. And then after a few months, when Salvatore was becoming quite normal and he goes to work in his father's vineyard and fishing, then her mother told him that in village there is a young woman who was willing to marry Salvatore, and her name is Assunta. She is as ugly as the devil, he said. Salvatore has seen Assunta in church once, and he know that she is such an ugly as the devil. She was older than he, 24 or 25, and she had been engaged to a man who, while doing his military service, had been killed in Africa. She had a little money of her own, and if Salvatore married her, she could buy him a boat of his own, and they could take a vineyard that by happy chance happened at that moment to be without a tenant. Assunta was older than Salvatore. She was 24 or 25 years, and she was already engaged to a man who was killed in Africa while doing his military service. Assunta had little money of her own, and if Salvatore agrees to marry her, she'll buy a boat and they can also take a vineyard, which is luckily is without tenant. Tenant means without rent. His mother told him that Assunta had seen him at the festa and had fallen in love with him. Salvatore smiled his sweet smile and said he would think about it. Salvatore's mother told him that Assunta has seen him. Assunta had seen Salvatore at Festa. Festa means a religious festival, and since then she had fallen in love with him. Firstly, Salvatore was not ready to marry her and says that she was ugly as devil. But when her mother says that she is in love with him, he agrees to meet her. On the following Sunday, dressed in the stiff black clothes in which he looked so much less well than in the rag shirt and trousers of every day, he went up to high mass at the parish church and praised himself so that he could have a good look at the young woman. When he came down again, he told his mother that he was willing. In the previous section, we have noticed that Salvatore never wore shoes except on Sundays because he goes to the church. So, on the following Sunday, he dressed nicely in a stiff black clothes and in which he looks so much well, means and he was looking quite well than in the rag shirt and trousers of every day. He went up to the high mass at the parish church. Parish means local church. It means that he went to the church in local and placed himself, and means sat to have a good look, to have a nice look on the young woman, on Assunta, so that he could decide that he has to marry her or not. And when he returned home, he told her mother that he is willing to marry her. Well, they were married and they settled down in a tiny whitewashed house in the middle of a handsome vineyard. Salvatore was now a great big husky fellow, tall and broad, but still with that ingenuous smile and those trusting, kindly eyes that he had as a boy. And now they are married, and they settle down in a tiny house in the middle of handsome vineyard, which they have of their own. Salvatore is now a great and big husky fellow. Big husky means rough and tough. He's tall and broader, rough and tough now, but still he has that childish smile and trusting childish eyes. He had the most beautiful manners I have ever seen in my life. The narrator says that Salvatore has the most beautiful manners, most good manners, which the narrator has ever seen in his life. Assunta was a grim-visaged female with decided features, and she looked old for her years, but she had a good heart and she was no fool. I used to be amused by the little smile of devotion that she gave her husband when he was being very masculine and masterful. She never ceased to be touched by his gentle sweetness. Assunta, with the passage of time, becomes a grim-faced female. Grim-faced means with a serious face and with decided features, and she looks older than her years, means she looks more than her age. But she has a good heart and she is quite sensible and intelligent. She is no fool. She is not a fool. Narrator feels happy and amused when Salvatore used to be being very masterful or commandful, and Assunta give a sweet smile and she has the feeling of devotion to her husband. But she could not bear the girl who had thrown him over, and notwithstanding Salvatore's smiling expostulations, she had nothing but harsh words for her. Presently children were born to them. Assunta can't bear that girl who has dumped Salvatore, and she has nothing but only harsh words for her. She thinks that how can a girl dump such a nice boy, and presently they became parents of two children. It was a hard enough life all through the fishing season. Towards evening, he set out in his boat with one of his brothers for the fishing grounds. It was a long pull of 6 or 7 miles, and he spent the night catching the profitable cuttlefish. It was a hard and tough life for them, and Salvatore worked all through the fishing season, and he went out to in the evening. He set out in his boat with one of his brothers to the fishing grounds, and it's nearly 6 to 7 miles to the fishing grounds. And he spent his whole night catching the profitable cuttlefish. Cuttlefish is a type of fish, and then there was a long row back again in order to sell the catch in time for it to go on the early boat to Naples. At other times he was working in his vineyard from dawn till the heat drove him to rest, and then again when it was a trifle cooler till dusk. And then the next day, it's a quite long distance to go back again to sell the profitable cuttlefish which they had catch, uh, and they go on the early boat to Naples. At other times he was working in his vineyard from dawn till the heat drove him to rest, and then again when it was a trifle cooler till dusk. And at the other time he works in his vineyard with his father and his brother from dawn till the morning, and often his rheumatism prevented him from doing anything at all, and then he would lie about the beach smoking cigarettes with a pleasant word for everyone, notwithstanding the pain that racked his limbs. Most of the time his rheumatism prevented him from doing anything. Still, after taking rest for a short while, he would continue to walk. And a lot of people think that he is lazy. The foreigners who came down to bathe and saw him there said that these Italian fishermen were lazy devils. The foreigners who came down there to take a bath, and when he saw them, Salvatore, lying about the beach, so they feel that these Italian fishermen are lazy devils. Means they are very lazy. They don't do any work. They always lie about the beach and do nothing. But we know that he is really hardworking, as he worked in vineyard till evening and set out to fishing grounds and spent his whole night catching profitable cuttlefish. Sometimes he used to bring his children down to give them a bath. They were both boys, and at this time the elder was 3 and the younger was less than 2. They sprawled about at the water's edge, stark naked, and Salvatore, standing on the rock, would dip them in water. Sometimes Salvatore bring his children there to beach to give them a bath, and they were both boys. And at this time, the elder was of 3 years old and younger was less than 2 years. They sprawled. Sprawl means to lie with legs spread out. They sprawled their legs out there at the water's edge, stark naked. And Salvatore standing on the rock. And Salvatore stands on the rock and would dip the children in the water. The elder one bore it with stoicism, but the baby screams lustily. Salvatore had enormous hands like legs of mutton, coarse and hard from constant toil. But when he bathed his children, holding them so tenderly, drying them with delicate care, upon my word, they were like flowers. The elder one bore it with stoicism. Stoicism means patience. The elder one bore it with ease and patience, but the smaller one screamed lustily. He screamed heartily. Salvatore has enormous, rough and big hands, and like legs of mutton. Legs of mutton here is comparison of hard flesh. Means the flesh of Salvatore was very hard, coarse, and we know that why was it hard? Because of the constant work, because of the constant toil, means because of the constant hard work. But when he bathed his children, when he bathed his children, holding them so tenderly, then he hold his children with such a delicate care, with such a delicate, tender. He used to hold him with such a delicate care and tenderness, as they were like flowers. He would seat the naked baby on the palm of his hand and hold him up, laughing a little at his smallness, and his laugh was like laughter of an angel. His eyes then were as candid as his child's. Then he would seat his smaller or younger child on the palm of his hand and hold him up. And he laughs at his smallness, that he is so small he doesn't know about the world which is around it, and he don't know the strange things which is going on in this world. He is happy. And laugh of Salvatore was like the laughter of an angel. Laughter of an angel is a symbol of purity. His eyes then were as candid as his child. Means Salvatore's eyes has the childish nature, as frank. His eyes, he has the nature of, he was friendly nature. He was of friendly nature. I started by saying that I wondered if I can do it, and now I must tell you what it is that I have tried to do. I wanted to see whether I could hold your attention for a few pages while I drew for you the portrait of a man, just an ordinary fisherman, who possessed nothing in the world except a quality which is the rarest, the most precious, and the loveliest that anyone can have. Here the suspense will reveal, the suspense of the first line, where the narrator started by saying that I wonder if I can do it. Now he is going to tell why he said that. Actually, he just wanted to hold the reader's attention for a few pages while he drew a portrait of Salvatore, who is just an ordinary fisherman who don't possess anything, who possess nothing in the world except a quality. He just possess a quality which is the rarest, which is the most precious and loveliest in the world, and no one have this. No one have this quality. Heaven only knows why he should so strangely and unexpectedly have possessed it. All I know is that it's shown in him with the radiance that, if it had not been unconscious and so humble, would have been to the common run of men hardly bearable. And in case you have not guessed what the quality was, I'll tell you: goodness, just goodness. And narrator don't know how Salvatore has bear all these strange and unexpected things which had done to him. But narrator only know that the quality shown in Salvatore with the radiance. Radiance means brightness. Shown in him with the radiance, with the brightness. That if he had not been unconscious and so humble, that if Salvatore was not unconscious and not so humble, then he would be as common as the run of common men. And at last, narrator said that if the readers have not guessed that what the quality was, so the narrator says that the quality is just goodness. This quality bestowed upon Salvatore by the grace of God. Narrator feels that Salvatore is extremely good and well-mannered, and he has a lot of troubles in his life, but he doesn't change. Now we get to know that Salvatore is a static character because he doesn't change in the whole story. He's a very sensitive guy. So that was it from me for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video up to the very end. And of course, if you have some questions, please feel free to comment down below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and keep an eye out for my next video. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye bye.